during World War II, and in 1944 was shot down in the Pacific. But that selfless sacrifice wasn't enough. He went on to spend 40 years in public service as a congressman from Texas, as an ambassador to the United Nations, and as the United States envoy to China, as director of the CIA, and of course as vice president, and then as president. He wore so many hats during his time in service, but through it all, he was a true statesman who treated both his friends and his rivals with grace and dignity. He also viewed the world through the lens of history, which was often the guiding force in his approach to diplomacy and dealing with the rest of the world. As president, he helped to bring an end to 4 decades of the Cold War and the threat of nuclear engagement as democracy spread throughout Eastern Europe. And he signed the Bipartisan American with Disabilities Act, which has had a lasting impact in expanding the rights of Americans with disabilities. His commitment to his country was unshakable, and he instilled this value in his own children. For George H.W. Bush, patriotism was bigger than political rivalries. In 1993, as he departed the White House, he left a note which many of us saw for the first time this week. It was a note he left for President Clinton, who had defeated President Bush in the presidential election just 2 months before he signed that letter. President Bush said, "You will be our president when you read this note. I wish you well. I wish your family well. Your success is now our country's success. I am rooting hard for you." He wrote that note just as he was turning over the keys to the Oval Office to someone who had just defeated him in an election campaign. President Bush was someone who fought hard on the campaign trail, but once the votes were cast, he understood the underlying truth of America, that people with different political views are not enemies, and that when all is said and done, we can come together to advance the cause of America, not tear it down. President Bush, as Senator Portman noted, his death comes less than 8 months after the passing of former First Lady Barbara Bush, his wife of over 73 years. Never one to be a shrinking violet, she was fiercely loyal to her family and an outspoken advocate for causes that she believed in. I always respected her directness. She was her own person who loved her family and her country, and we remember her this week as well. I was reading in our local Minneapolis paper, actually, a story. I did not know this, that President Bush actually trained in Minnesota in the middle of winter for a few months before he went over to serve in the Pacific. And during that time, he wrote a number of letters to his own mother about his service. Okay, maybe he complained about the Minnesota weather a little bit, but one of the more amusing parts of those letters was that he told her that Barbara was sending him some socks that she knit for him down in Texas. And he said in the letter that she said they don't even look like socks. But when he received the socks, he said, they're actually not bad. They're pretty good socks. And you literally could follow that part of his life in the letters he was writing back then to his mother. You could see the patriotism shine through. You could see what it was like for him to be away from his family and how much he loved his family. And to think that that carried on to the very end of his life when he was still so kind in these notes and so sweet to his family members and to those who were his friends for so very long. As we pay tribute to President Bush's tremendous record of service, we also must stay grounded in his respect for all public servants, not just the ones he agreed with, and his unwavering belief in his own words that no definition of a successful life can do anything but include serving others. Of course, that service can come in many forms, as he showed in his own life. Some people may serve in the military. Some people may take on causes outside of government service and volunteer. Others may work in law enforcement, and others may, of course, get elected or have the privilege to work in this Capitol for the people. President Bush lived that life.